I kept the Ashford house running 6 days a week for a man who didn't learn my last name until the end of my first year there. That's not a complaint. It's just the truth of the job. The house sat at the top of Larkspur Hill, white columns, a circular driveway big enough to turn a limousine around in, and a kitchen with more square footage than the apartment my brother and I shared in town. I'd been a bookkeeper once, before my father died, and the bills started arriving faster than I could open them. Now I made beds and polished silver, and kept a small notebook in my apron pocket. The way I always had, because my father used to say, "Write it down, Danny. Numbers don't lie, but memory does." He'd been gone 3 years. Heart sudden, on a Tuesday. Before he passed, he pressed a brass key into my hand. The key to the house we lost 6 months later. The one the bank took because the payments fell behind faster than I could catch them. I still carried that key. I don't know why. The house wasn't ours anymore. My brother Creed was 17, and had a heart condition that needed a specialist in Columbus we couldn't afford to see regularly. I worked so he could keep seeing that doctor. That was the whole shape of my life. Work save hope. Lucius Ashford barely noticed me those first months. He noticed the house being clean and the wine being poured and nothing else. He'd lost his fiancée, Medea Sinclair, 5 years back. She left 3 weeks before their wedding for a man with a bigger name attached to his, and something in him had gone quiet and cold since then. Not cruel, just closed. I preferred it that way. Unnoticed was safer than judged. Then his grandfather, Thornton Ashford, got sick. The old man had built the company from a single hardware store in 1974, and he had one rule left in him: show up to the family gala with a wife, or watch the trust get signed over to a foundation before he died. I didn't know any of that yet. I just knew that on a Thursday in March, Lucius walked into the dining room with his phone still warm in his hand, and a look on his face I'd never seen before. He looked right at me. "I need a wife. Now. Come with me." I stared at him. I was sure I'd misheard. He explained it fast, the way people explain things they're ashamed of. His grandfather, the gala, the trust, the ultimatum. He needed someone at his side for one night. He offered me an amount of money that would have covered 2 years of Creed's treatments without me touching a single paycheck. I set the tray down on the sideboard. Slowly. Deliberately. Then I told him no. I told him I was poor, but I wasn't for sale. He asked why I'd turned down money that could change my life. I told him money could pay for medicine. It couldn't buy back the part of me that still had to look in a mirror every morning. I walked out of the room before he could answer. You know that feeling when you've been patient for so long that patience itself starts to feel like the only thing you have left, and someone offers to take it too, for a price? I felt that walking back to the kitchen. I felt it for 3 days after. Lucius didn't bring it up again. That surprised me more than the offer had. What surprised me even more was what I started noticing about him once I stopped trying not to look. He ate dinner standing at the counter most nights, alone, in a house with 11 rooms. He remembered the gardener's daughter's name after meeting her once. He left a light on in the hallway every night. I found out later it was because his grandfather had told him once that dark houses made a man forget he had people in them. Then on a Tuesday, he found me in the pantry with a hospital bill in my hand, and my face wet before I could stop it. Creed's treatment had been postponed. The deposit was $400 I didn't have. Lucius didn't say anything grand. He just asked how much. I told him no. Again. I reminded him I'd already turned down his money once. He said this wasn't a business deal. I still said no. I found out what he'd done on a Friday, and it took me 3 days to forgive him for it. The hospital called to confirm Creed's appointment. I told them there had to be a mistake. I hadn't paid the deposit yet. The woman on the phone said the balance had been cleared. Paid in full. I didn't need 3 guesses. I found Lucius in his study and set my hands flat on his desk. I told him I hadn't asked for this. He said he knew. I told him I didn't want charity. He said it wasn't charity. It was just a man doing something good because he could, and because for once he wanted to. I was raised to believe that help always came with a bill attached, even when nobody said the number out loud. Nobody ever taught me what to do when someone paid a bill and asked for nothing back. That was the first sign something in him had shifted. I noticed things after that I hadn't let myself see before. He left a small bowl of water outside for the stray dog that wandered up from the ravine behind the property. He never mentioned it. I only knew because I filled it myself one morning before he woke, and the next morning it was already full. He started eating dinner at the table instead of standing at the counter. Sometimes he asked me to sit with him. I did some nights. We didn't talk about the gala or his grandfather or the money. We talked about nothing. Ohio winters. The dog. My father's old habit of writing everything down in a green ledger he kept in his coat pocket. Write it down, I told him once. That's what my father used to say. Numbers don't lie, even when people do. Lucius looked at me for a long moment after I said that. Like he was writing it down somewhere I couldn't see. 3 days before the gala, he found me in the kitchen again. This time he didn't ask me to pretend anything. He asked me to come with him. No contract. No payment. He said I could leave the second I wanted to. I should have said no a third time. I didn't. You know that feeling when you've spent so long protecting your heart that you almost don't recognize the moment it starts opening again? I felt that, standing in that kitchen, saying yes to a man I'd told myself I wouldn't trust. This is where things started to get hard to watch. The gala was held in the same ballroom where Ashford Holdings had celebrated every anniversary for 40 years. Gold ceiling, a string quartet, a chandelier the size of a car. I wore a simple navy dress Ocean, Lucius's sister, had helped me pick out. No diamonds. No designer name stitched anywhere. When I came down the staircase, the room went quiet for a second before the whispering started. I heard it before I saw the faces. A woman in emerald green leaned toward her husband and asked, loud enough for me to catch every word, whether Lucius had hired me for the evening. I felt the heat climb up my neck. I started to turn back toward the stairs. Lucius caught my hand before I could. He didn't pull me toward the exit. He turned us both to face the room. He told them, calm, steady, not a single raised word, that I was the only person in his life who had ever refused his money and still looked at him like a person instead of a bank account. He told them I'd paid for a stranger's dog to eat before I ever thought to ask him for anything for myself. He said I'd cared for his staff better than he had for years, and he'd never noticed until I stopped being invisible to him. Then he said the part that made the whole room go still. He said the woman he'd once asked to pretend to be his wife had become the only woman he could picture building a real life with. Nobody moved. Not even the quartet. I didn't answer him right away. I walked toward him slowly, and I told him quietly, quiet enough that only he could hear it, that if he wanted me in his life, it couldn't be because I'd saved him from his grandfather, or his family, or his own loneliness. It had to be because he loved me, not because I was useful to him. He said he was still learning what love looked like on him, but he knew the house felt wrong when I wasn't in it. I took his hand, not because of the money, not because of Creed's bills, already paid twice over now. I took it because for the first time since I'd walked into that house with a mop bucket and a resume nobody read past the first line, Lucius wasn't asking me to become something for him. He was asking me to just be myself. I reached into my coat pocket that night, out of old habit, and felt my father's brass key still sitting where it always sat. I didn't need it to open anything anymore. I just needed to know it was there. That was almost a year ago now. Creed finished his treatment that spring. He's 18 now, healthy enough that his cardiologist only wants to see him twice a year instead of every month. He still teases me about the green ledger I keep in my coat pocket, the one that used to be my father's, the one I write everything in, the good and the hard parts both. I don't work in that house as staff anymore. Lucius asked me to run the foundation his grandfather Thornton left behind before he passed, quietly, in his sleep, 6 months after that gala. I only agreed once Lucius understood I'd track every dollar the way my father taught me, and that I wouldn't take a title I hadn't earned. Lucius changed too, in ways nobody at that gala would have believed. He visits the hospital where Creed was treated without a camera crew trailing him. He learned the names of every person who works in his buildings, not just the ones who report directly to him. Once a week, he eats dinner with the staff at the house on Larkspur Hill, at the same table where he used to eat standing up, alone. We argue sometimes. I still catch myself waiting for the bill to come due on kindness, the way I was raised to expect. Some nights he still goes quiet in that old way, And I have to remind him the door works both directions now. But we keep choosing each other. That's the part nobody tells you about love that starts this way. It isn't a rescue. It's a choice you keep making, on the ordinary days, long after the ballroom lights go out. 1 year to the day after that gala, Lucius brought me back to that same room. No family pressure this time. No pretending. He got down on one knee in front of the same people who'd once asked if I'd been hired for the evening. And he asked me to be his wife for real. I cried before I could answer him. Then I said yes. My father used to say numbers don't lie, but memory does. I think about that brass key in my coat pocket sometimes, the one to a house that isn't mine anymore, and I understand now what he meant. A person's worth was never in the house, or the money, or the name on the door. Write it down. Sometimes the quietest person in the room isn't waiting to be rescued. Sometimes she's the one who ends up rescuing everyone else.